Oh, yes.
Welcome back, everyone. Today I am ecstatic to be bringing you a review for the brand new Transformers Legacy Commander class, Decepticon Motormaster. Motormaster is so far our only new Commander class for the year, and he represents a brand new take on the Stunticon leader, where he actually comes with his trailer for the first time in a long time. However, unlike the original toy, the trailer is not integrated into his body. It forms a battle station, much in the same vein as like Optimus Prime. In fact, I think a big part of the design philosophy was to make him be able to scale well with Optimus Prime in both vehicle and robot modes as kind of like an evil foil to him. This toy has also turned some heads because it completely shakes up the combiner formula. It's completely foregone the use of his teammates as dedicated limbs and instead has gone for the 1980s cartoon approach of basically having Motormaster turn into a large robot, like a super robot, and then just slapping his teammates on his arms and legs like armor. If you've been following me for any length of time, you already know how I feel about this, so I'm going to do my best not to harp on it too much. Like, for me, it's just not at all the route I would have gone for a Menasor update. I love the Scramble City playstyle, and I'm absolutely convinced they could have revisited that and just improved on what we started with Combiner Wars. That being said, if you've seen my reviews before, you know how this goes. We're going to take a look at Motormaster's packaging, then we'll open it up, we'll get a good look at the instructions, and then we'll see Motormaster himself in vehicle, robot, and base modes, and then even super robot or combiner mode. Naturally, I'll be doing plenty of group shots and comparisons today, and then at the end of the video, I'll give my final thoughts. So Motormaster comes in your Commander class packaging, which is a huge closed face box, no window. And instead of a window, we get just this massive bit of artwork in his vehicle mode. And he's cruising down what appears to be a Seibertronian highway. And the artwork's very, very faithful to the new toy. You can even see the other Stunticons kind of driving around. You have, I think that's Breakdown up there. And then we have Dragstrip and I'm not sure if that's Dead End or Wild Rider. I think that's Dead End and that's Wild Rider. I'm not sure. The red ones. It's hard to tell from the little picture. So that's really our first look at the alt modes for all of the Stunticons. Previously, we had only seen Dragstrip and Wild Rider, though Dead End has also since been revealed before I managed to get Motormaster in hand and do this review. So there are renders of him out there now. So really, the only one we haven't seen in its entirety is Breakdown. Right, all around the frame of this, we get our Transformers logos, the Legacy logo, Commander class callout, and his name right here. On the top of the box, we get the Legacy logo and a render of the vehicle mode. On this side, your normal Legacy Decepticon side panel. On this side, we actually get artwork of Menasor. So apparently there's no robot mode artwork of Motormaster, just the Menasor, or at least the part of Menasor that's formed by Motormaster, because they don't have any of the cars attached. Now, one thing that's really interesting is you can see here up at the top, they depict the Nemesis flying around yet again. So this is, I believe, the third time in the last year or so that the Nemesis has appeared on somebody's box art. It started with the Ark in Kingdom, and people didn't think too much of it because, like, well, it's the Ark, the Nemesis is like, the antithesis of that, it makes sense to have it in there. But then it also just recently appeared on the brand new Titan class, Metroplex. And Metroplex, being a Unicron Trilogy character, should have nothing to do with, the G1 ship, the Nemesis. So it really, really looks like they're trying to drop hints here. And, the rumor is that it's going to be either the next Titan class or one of the next Titan classes. So that'll be really interesting to see. I'm curious to see what they're going to do with a Titan class Nemesis. Admittedly, I hope it's better than the Ark, because I wasn't really blown away with the Ark. Like, the robot mode's cool, but it's nothing special. And then the giant gaping holes in the side of the Ark just really killed it for me. All right, we get to see his name up here, Motormaster. Is that Motormaster? Yeah, Motormaster, not Menasor. All right. And on the back, we get all of our renders here, right? So we get the vehicle mode again. Then we get the base mode with the robot mode mounted atop it. Then we show the cab transforming into the robot mode. And then we see the render for the super robot or Menasor mode. And they also show off some little line art bits here for Dragstrip forming the right arm, and then Wild Rider forming the left leg. because at the time that this guy was unveiled, those were the only two other Stunticons that had been unveiled, so they don't want to spoil it, right? Now, at the time of filming this, I only have Dragstrip because I don't think any of the Wave 2 Legacy Deluxes have been spotted here in the US. So there's no Wild Riders show off, there's no other Stunticons. So it's going to be a pretty minimal look at the combiner compatibility here. All right, now that covers everything about the box, as very, very nice looking as it is. I love the artwork. I mean, they really have stepped up the artwork lately. And I love, you know, the attention to detail, all the little background characters and all that. Like, Legacy artwork just rocks. It's really good stuff. All right, here we have the instructions for Motormaster. You can see quite a thick little booklet here. So as usual, we get your name right here at the bottom, then your branding all around the edge, render in the middle. Let's open this bad boy up. Okay, so starting out, it just shows you how to attach the trailer to the cab section, and then transform the cab to the Motormaster robot. And you can place this large cannon in his hand, which comes from the top of the trailer, we'll see that in a second, or the sword, which is, well, also stored in the trailer. Maybe they should have done that part first, huh? All right, this shows you how to take the trailer apart, or really, I guess, put it together into its component pieces. The sword is stored inside the front part, and then it all just kind of snaps together. And it's even got a little kickstand. I don't know what you call that on an actual tractor trailer, kickstand-like thing, that holds it up when Motormaster's not attached, which is very cool. It's a nice touch. Then this shows you how to separate the different pieces of the trailer into their like components, and then combine those components into the base mode, complete with weapon emplacement here for the cannon. Flip it around, and then we get to the transformation from regular robot to super robot / combiner mode. Really a super robot. But I know people are gonna say, oh, it's a combiner, and like, sure, if you want to lie to yourself. Believe the lie. So yeah, there's the super robot mode, and I was initially annoyed that this part of the trailer doesn't integrate into the super robot, because I thought it was just like useless kibble that got left to the side, which, you know, 2022, that really shouldn't be a thing anymore. But luckily they actually, you know, made it work. You can reconfigure the cannon to be taller, so this can actually be used by Menasor. So at least it's not useless, and I will give them props for making sure that every part gets used in some way. All right, and then this shows you how to attach Dragstrip and Wild Rider to Menasor, because these were the only two that were released when Motormaster got released. I'm assuming the other two members, Dead End and Breakdown, will include these parts in their instructions. And that's it. So everything you need. It's a big instruction book, but he's a pretty complicated toy, so it makes sense. And now here is the complete flat-nose semi-truck vehicle mode for Motormaster. And you can see it's got quite a bit of presence to it. This is not a small vehicle mode, and that's thanks mostly in part to the enormous trailer that he's towing. So if you want to separate the cab from the trailer, simply just pull this up out of it. Use a little 5mm post right here. And then you have the kickstand piece that swings down, so the trailer can stand on its own, much like the Earthrise Optimus Prime trailer, like that. And then we get to see the cab by itself. And it's admittedly a bit flimsy. This isn't heavy at all. He's not a heavy toy, maybe equivalent to like a very, very lightweight Voyager. And I think that's mainly due to the fact that his trailer contains so much mass and is so very complicated, especially when you get to the combining mechanisms, that it ate up most of the budget, and that does leave Motormaster feeling a little bit hollow. I mean, he looks fine. Like, he looks perfectly okay, but you can definitely feel the difference between him and, you know, a similar, or a figure of similar size. Like, he's fairly lightweight. But he looks alright. He's not, you know, flimsy or anything. He rolls very well, which is nice. And there's not too much obvious kibble. You can see the robot torso on the back. Well, actually, you know, I take that back. There's some very obvious kibble because his head's poking out. Never mind. I'm repealing that mark right there. Yeah, well, that's unfortunate, isn't it? You might be able to turn the head around, but you're still going to see it from the front, so... Alright, yeah. Bad head is bad. Like, at least it could have been, like, folded all the way up underneath, but you can definitely just see it from the back, which is unfortunate. All right, so aside from that, it's pretty solid. I have this one panel on my copy that really doesn't want to stay tabbed in right. Like, it'll stay if you don't touch it, but any sort of force on it and it'll like start popping out of place, which is mildly annoying. Not the worst thing ever, and you can see it's not aligned very well. I don't know if this is a common issue or not, but it is an issue on my copy. Now, one thing I do want to address is the reports of yellowing on certain copies of Motormaster, and I think most of those reports came out of Australia, where this guy dropped, you know, much earlier than here in the States. He does have a lot of white plastic on him. You can see it here, you can see it there, and apparently it's prone to yellowing, like, very badly. Like, a lot of people were saying that they were getting theirs out of the box and it was already yellow. I can't say I've had that issue yet. I've had this toy for about a week now before I got to this point in the review, and so far no yellowing's occurred. So, I don't know. I'm not sure if they fixed whatever was going on, or if, you know, mine's just been stored in a better climate or what it is. But so far, all of his whites are nice and bright white. I'll let you guys know if that changes at some point, but as of right now, I haven't had that issue myself. All right, here's our first comparison shot for the video. And for it, we have the Combiner Wars Menasor, which was a Voyager class toy, and was a pretty heavy departure from his classic appearance. Now, the overall vehicle mode is the same, right? It is a flat-nosed semi-truck, though you can see it's very, very heavily stylized, and for some reason eschews a lot of the black for a gray color. Not really sure why. And if you don't really know the history of this toy, it was a figure that was not very well received, and a large part of that is because it was so very compromised because they decided to pre-tool Menasor in a way to where this toy can be used to make a combining Optimus Prime as well. Which means that the Menasor was just the cab portion. Like, neither this toy nor the Optimus Prime actually came with a trailer. Speaking of trailers, I'm sure somebody will wonder this. Unfortunately, the new Menasor trailer is not compatible with this guy. For one, this deck is too high, and also his like little trailer hitch, for some reason, has these indentations in it that prevent an actual 5mm post from going inside. So, yeah, you're just kind of out of luck there. So, can't use the trailer. Would have been a nice little bit of cross-compatibility, but it's not the case. So yeah, you can see very, very different looking vehicle modes. Now, I don't hate this Menasor for what he is. I think his vehicle mode and even his robot mode look fine. I view them as more of like a classics update to Menasor, but he definitely did not scratch that itch for a lot of people. Now, there is the Takara Unite Warriors version, which at least gets the colors a lot closer, but the molding is still very, very different. Plus, that toy is actually prone to gold plastic syndrome, which is ironic because it's actually the black plastic that breaks, but, you know, doesn't actually have to be gold. It just has to be a metallic fleck plastic, and in that case, that's what it was. Very similar to the Transmetal Megatron toy. So yeah, you can see these two, markedly different from each other, very, very little in common. This guy honestly looks more like Optimus Prime than he does Menasor. I mean, he's even got the smokestacks here. Yeah, they're just very different toys. And again, it doesn't mean I dislike this toy for, you know, its vehicle mode or anything, but it really just doesn't look very much like your G1 Menasor. Now we get to see Motormaster next to our Earthrise Optimus Prime, who is also a flat-nosed semi-truck, and you can see that Motormaster absolutely dwarfs Optimus in this mode. His truck mode is so much bigger. I mean, you know, in real scale, he'd be at least a foot, you know, higher off the ground than Optimus here. Now, the length of the trailer is, it's not too much more than Optimus, but you can see it's much taller and much wider, and significantly heavier. Optimus Prime's trailer is really just a box that opens up. Like, there's not a lot to it. It's got the one little diagnostic drone in there. Doesn't even have roller unless you go and buy the accessory pack, Centurion drone one. But, you know, I'm looking at, you know, what comes stock, right? What's actually in the package. So yeah, Motormaster is just a much more heavy-duty looking truck than Optimus, and really just shows how small the leader class Optimus Prime is. You would think that Optimus would be at least a little bit closer to Motormaster in total size, but yeah, no, he looks absolutely puny next to him, so that's a real shame. If we want, we can remove the trailers to see how the cabs stack up to each other. So set that aside. Set Optimus aside here. This little panel popping out is getting really annoying. Really, really annoying. Alright. So now we're going to see these. So lengthwise, they're just about dead even. So at least the lengths are close. Motormaster is just a much, much taller semi. And yeah, it's what happens when you have, you know, different characters that have to be different sizes in all modes. You know, sometimes the scale is not going to line up right. And, you know, in vehicle mode here, that's definitely the case. Traditionally, Motormaster has never been depicted as significantly bigger than Optimus. If anything, he might have actually been shown as smaller. But personally, I don't get very hung up on vehicle mode scale. In my mind, robot mode should always be the priority when you're doing scaling. So if you have an unusually large or unusually small vehicle because it has to work for the robot, I'm kind of okay with that. It's nice when they can make it work and you can get characters that look well scaled in their vehicle modes. But if you have to pick one, I'm always going to go robot mode. That's just my priority. Maybe some people feel differently. And it's not like they're so ridiculously out of scale that it's comical, right? It's not like Optimus is this big and Motormaster is this big, so, you know, it doesn't bother me too much. If anything, it makes me realize just how small the Leader Class Optimus Prime really is. Maybe they should have made him a bit bigger. Maybe he should have been a commander, honestly. Like, if they can't make a good Optimus at leader scale, maybe we just need to bump him up. And, you know, I don't really want to pay $80 to $90 for an Optimus, but if he's a really, really good one, I'll feel a lot better about it. Like, if he's worthy of commander class prices, sure, why not? I'm still waiting on that canceled Commander Ultra Magnus that was going to be, you know, this Optimus, but in white, and then, like, proper armor and everything. I don't know if you guys have heard about that, but that was a thing in the planning stages. It was going to be a white Earthrise Optimus with the proper Ultra Magnus trailer that combined with them and everything. Got scrapped, which is a shame. Maybe we'll see it one day, because I felt the Kingdom one was just an absolute disappointment. And while I'm yammering on, I do wonder, their trailer decks seem to be right about the same height. I wonder if they can tow each other's trailers. Let's see. Let's find out. A little tight. Kind of works, though. For roll, so I'll call that a pass for Motormaster. Let's see if Optimus can tow his trailer. Kind of feel like he can't because his trailer hitch is so much for... Yeah, no. Won't reach. The height's not too bad. I think it would... Like, if you let it recess in here, I think it would probably work more or less, but it can't get in there. Even if you remove that rifle there, it still wouldn't work. Oh yeah, I keep forgetting to mention this. Kind of out of order, but I should mention it now. So on my copy, on my Motormaster, this panel right here that has these two wheels is really, really bent. And look at that. It does not want to stay. It's like warped very badly. And it came that way out of the box, and that's very unfortunate because it's a bit of an eyesore. Now, you can't notice it too much from the outside on the trailer mode, but when we do the combiner mode, you're going to see it because it sticks out like a sore thumb. Again, just a QC issue on my copy. I wouldn't expect that on yours, but it is something that could potentially happen because it is a pretty flimsy panel. For our next comparison, here's Kingdom Rodimus Prime, which was the most recent previous Commander class toy. And much like Menasor, he's a roughly Voyager-sized robot with a huge trailer. Now, in the vehicle mode, they appear to be about the same size. I think Rodimus is a little longer, but Menasor is a little taller. I did go and weigh these two, though, and it turns out that Menasor is actually quite a bit heavier. Rodimus clocks in at 611 grams, and Menasor clocks in at 739. So there is more toy here. And that's always a good thing, because I always felt Rodimus was a little iffy at the Commander price point. Like, he's a great, great toy, but I was never fully convinced that he was worth that, you know, 80 to 90 bucks. Menasor, already being a good deal heavier, proves that mass-wise, he's more worth it. Now, of course, there's more than just mass that goes into it. There's engineering, parts count, paint apps, all that. But at least, you know, right off the bat, we're not feeling like we're getting gypped. Because if you were okay with Rodimus at his price point, you should, you know, so far be okay with Menasor. So yeah, you can see, similar to Optimus, Rodimus turns into a vehicle towing a trailer. So that does put him very close in aesthetic to Menasor. Now, he is a bit different. He doesn't articulate from his trailer. And if you saw my review for Rodimus, you know that they didn't quite get the cab part right. because the Rodimus cab is supposed to look more like a futuristic truck than a futuristic car, but for whatever reason, necessity, preference, the designers decided to make the car part closer to Hot Rod's vehicle mode than Rodimus's. Now, one thing that Rodimus includes that Menasor actually doesn't is a whole bunch of blast effects. And you can see I have them attached here, just so you can see, you know, the total package to compare them fairly. You get all these blue blast effects here, you get the solid black like smoke ones, and then stored underneath, you even get the matrix glow for his included matrix of leadership. So, you know, Rodimus does come with a few things to help flesh him out. It still doesn't get him to the same weight class as Menasor, but they were trying to find a way to justify that price point because he was definitely too complex for a regular leader. Now, real quick, if you want to see how the car or cab modes compare, go ahead and pop the trailers off again. Rodimus is a little harder to get out of his. There you go. So you can see, truck, car. Very, very big car, because it needs to be to scale well with the trailer. And there that panel goes popping off again. I swear, that is going to drive me crazy. Let me know if any of you guys have the same issue with that panel not quite aligning properly, because it's really bugging me. Alright, so we talked about the weight comparison between the two complete vehicle modes. This time, if you go ahead and lift these two up, I don't know, Rodimus feels a little bit heavier. I think he's got a little bit of weight on Motormaster, and it kind of makes sense when you consider how much heavier and how much more fleshed out Motormaster's trailer is compared to Rodimus's. You know that more of that weight, more of that budget has to go into the trailer, therefore the robot or cab mode may not be as fleshed out. Once we take a look at the robot modes between these two, you'll see just how complex Rodimus is compared to Motormaster. But in the vehicle modes, the difference isn't quite that noticeable. They're, again, roughly similar size, very, very close in weight. I think Rodimus beats Motormaster out by like a little bit. But neither one feels very lacking in this mode, which is a good thing. You never want to feel dissatisfied with your toy in any mode. Now, because I know you guys would never forgive me if I didn't get this group shot, here's our shot of Menasor with his teammate Dragstrip. Sadly, I don't have Wild Rider yet, though he is on the way, so stay tuned for that. We'll be reviewing him soon enough. So this is going to be the first of many Stunticon group shots. That'll be done as I, collect more and more of these guys. And so far, it's looking pretty good. They seem to scale pretty well with each other. I think realistically, Dragstrip should be a little bit smaller compared to Motormaster's truck cab. But as long as he is smaller, that's really all that matters. Again, vehicle mode scale, not something I get too hung up on. And I have to say, so far, the team is starting to form up quite nicely. Okay, it is now time to transform Motormaster to his robot mode. But before we start on the cab, we're actually going to disassemble the trailer a little bit to free up the weapons for Motormaster. So go ahead and separate these two. Put this guy out of the way for a moment. The first thing you want to do is pull this front section off, like so. That unveils the sword. So go ahead, just set that aside. And you're going to pull these apart, like that. And then separate these bits from the cannon. So just leave all that stuff off to the side. Flip the barrels out. And you got yourself some weapons for your robot, which you're going to want. Alright, let's go ahead and put Motormaster back front and center so we can transform him. So the first thing you're going to do is pop open and swing out these panels, which means I no longer have to worry about this thing coming loose anymore. Alright, you're going to fold these bits in until they tab in. Now, one thing I will warn you about, some of these little panels that tab in, like these ones, and a couple more I'll show you in a second, they tab in very tightly. So transforming him back to his cab mode or vehicle mode and unfolding these may be a real pain, and you're gonna have to really fight with them to get just the right amount of leverage to break them free. So just be aware that it can be kind of frustrating. All right, so we did that, got that off, and we're going to lift these little top sections off one at a time, like so. We're going to fold them forward to tab into the front of the truck. That's going to cover up the windshields because we are using some fake parts to recreate the truck cab feet. Not my favorite approach, but it gives a nice end product. All right, you're going to untab these, fold everything out, separate the legs. Then you are going to fold the wheels in. Get them out of the way. And tilt these feet inward. Spin them around to unveil our teeny tiny, almost adorable little fake truck cabs. Look how cute they are. Okay. Then we have panels to fold in here, and these two are other panels that are a real pain to separate. My best advice is to get your nail up under, I can show that little bit sticking out right there, that little tab, and do it from there. Best way to get the leverage you need to separate those. All right, we'll fold these in until they click into place. And then take these guys, swing them forward, and plug them into the sides of the legs, which will cover up the side windows. And it does a pretty good job of hiding the original truck cab. You can still see part of the grille here, but overall, not too bad, honestly. Okay, now we're going to unplug his arms from the wheels here. Bring that down, out of the way. Fold the shoulder panels down till they click into place. Here and here. Open the forearm panels, which he thankfully has. Flip the fists out. Close the panels. Like so. And take this whole bit here, bring it up over his shoulders, bring it around here, and tab it in to form a little backpack. And here we go. That's a robot mode. Nothing too complex. Definitely something along the lines of a standard Voyager. And he looks pretty good. A little spindly, in my opinion. Motormaster is typically a pretty bulky looking character. Actually, you know what? I think I need to extend these more. Are they fully extended? No, there we go. Okay, yeah, make sure the knees, they're on double hinges, so make sure they extend all the way. Make him as tall as he's supposed to be. There we go. So yeah, looks pretty good. Again, especially like the thigh areas, they could stand to be a bit bigger, but I get how the transformation necessitates certain proportions. Not my preference, but it'll work, I guess. All right, let's check out his posability real quick. So he has a ball-jointed head. Actually, take that back. It's a swivel. I lied to you guys. Yeah, simple swivel head, and I get why it's not a ball joint. This framework around his head, which exists because the original toy, this part was like the underside of the truck, right? So it was like a big block that his head was in. They kind of shrunk it down for the cartoon, so that's why he has that. So it just kind of turns a full 360. It's got the universal shoulders, a bicep swivel, single bend knees, which go a little less than 90 degrees. He does have a wrist swivel, which is cool. Unfortunately, no articulated fingers, so that puts him behind the curve a little bit as far as commanders go, and even leaders, really. Even Optimus has articulated fingers. He's got a full waist swivel. He has ratcheted universal hips, so they ratchet in and out, back and forth. He's got technically a double knee bend, because you have the one hinge here, which already goes deep enough, but you can bend it here if you want to, though you really shouldn't need to, because you already get a very, very deep bend with that. Got thigh swivels, and he's got ankle tilt. And even a little bit of rotation, too, because of his transformation. So, yeah, very posable guy. Again, more like a Voyager than a leader, because a leader of this size would most likely have things like articulated fingers. But he's fairly solid. I do like him. Now we can go ahead and grab his accessories. So you have his iconic sword right here. It goes in this hand, or really any hand, but I'm going to put in this one. And then you have this cannon here. Now this is kind of comically large for old Motormaster. And it's got two handles. So basically whichever one you use, you want to keep straight and then bring the other one out a little bit just to get out of the way. I'm going to use this handle here. And it's heavy. His elbow is strong enough to hold it up, but the shoulder can't at certain angles. It's just too heavy. Maybe they should have ratcheted the shoulders. It looks okay. I probably wouldn't display him with the cannon. I'd just give him the sword. But if you want to give him a big old giant double barrel cannon, you sure can. Here's a robot mode comparison with the Combiner Wars Motormaster. And you can see very, very different looks to these guys. The Combiner Wars toy is some sort of hybrid of G1 Motormaster and Optimus Prime. And then also just kind of doing his own thing because he does transform very differently than either of those two characters' classic transformation. Now, he does look a little more the part of Motormaster in the robot mode, colors aside. Again, if you don't like the gray, you can always go with the Japanese version. But he is much bulkier looking than our new guy, and he is a good bit taller. though Combiner Wars Voyagers just tended to be rather large, and part of that was because they had to form the torsos of Combiners, so they were pretty bulky characters. This guy's no exception. And it could just be the fact that I'm used to seeing this version that makes this one look fairly scrawny in comparison. Maybe he's just overly bulky, though I always picture Motormaster as a bit of a brute. And this guy looks just maybe a little too lithe for my liking, for a guy that's supposed to be so very bossy and so very much keeping an iron fist on his team, that he's one of the few combiners where Motormaster is like the dominant part of the personality instead of being more of an even mix. Which could be why the animators decided to go the route of just basically making him the combiner and then just wearing the other guys like armor. So out of these two, you know, which one do I like more? Clearly this guy. Like, he is just a better toy. He's far more posable, and he looks a lot better as Motormaster, and he's just got a lot more play value to him. Though this guy himself, I mean, he's not a bad figure by any means. I mean, as, you know, just an individual robot, he's perfectly fine. He's a little lacking in articulation because he did come out, what, 7 years ago now? But overall, he looks pretty decent. You know, you look around at the back, he's got a bit of a backpack, but, I mean, so does this guy. And he's okay. He's not too bad. You know, I think the Combiner Wars toy was a lot stronger by itself than it was as part of a team. But of course, if you are going for, you know, G1 accuracy and something that really looks like the old toy or the old cartoon model, this guy's clearly got this one beat. Like, he just was made as Motormaster first, you know, wasn't compromised by a need to share a mold with Optimus Prime, and as such, he gets to be his own thing more. Especially when it comes to lower legs. That's probably where he shines, where he actually gets, you know, the truck cab feet and everything, and this guy just basically has Optimus Prime legs, so, yeah. Despite me liking this toy for what it is, I still think this one is just the better robot. And here's our comparison with Optimus Prime. You can see that Motormaster ends up being just a hair taller than Optimus, so their size difference isn't quite as pronounced in the robot mode as it is in the vehicle mode. And as far as things like articulation and all that, these two are very, very close. The one thing that Optimus does beat Motormaster out on is the fact that he does have a hinge so that his hands can open and close. This guy unfortunately lacks that. I don't think it would have broken the budget to include it, but I guess they decided it wasn't important enough. One thing that Motormaster here actually does a little bit better is while they both have a full waist swivel, Optimus Prime's is hampered by the back kibble here. You can only get that much motion out of it without, like, flipping the little back skirt down and kind of mistransforming him. This guy has no such issue. He can rotate all the way around if you want him to. So he does pose a little bit better than Optimus. Now, I don't think his paint and material selection is quite as fancy. Like, Optimus has this really, really nice layered chest section and everything. And he does just feel slightly more solid. Like, even though he's not very big, he feels very dense compared to Motormaster, who, again, just feels ever so slightly flimsy. Not, you know, that he's bad, but I don't know, he doesn't feel like a Voyager-sized leader in the way that Optimus Prime does. And now we get to look at Motormaster with Rodimus Prime's robot mode, and they're more or less the same height. Rodimus comes out as maybe slightly taller to the top of, you know, the crest of his helmet. And they both look about the same when it comes to complexity. The biggest difference is that Rodimus has some really enhanced articulation in his arms and shoulders. So he gets butterfly joints right here, right? He also has double elbow joints to allow him to, mostly to be able to grab onto the turret in his base mode. And then his hands are very articulated, where you have the two sets of hinges here. Well, I guess this part right here. Yeah, no, 2 sets. So he has like full articulation in his finger joints pretty much. So you get like the knuckles, you get the middle joint right there, and then the pointer even moves independently of the other fingers so that you can have him point at things. So I think in that regard, he very much outdoes Motormaster, because, you know, these guys being commander classes, you expect them to be very, very impressive if they're going to be Voyager size, right? If they're going to be small, that means they need to be very complex. And Rodimus really fit the bill there. Motormaster in comparison feels a little bit lacking. Now, we already do know that a lot more of Motormaster's budget went into his trailer than Rodimus's did, so I get that. So it may be perfectly fair that Rodimus's robot mode ends up coming out a little bit nicer than Motormaster's, because remember, Motormaster not only has to have a trailer that turns into a base, but then he has to be able to combine with that trailer to form a nice-looking robot. Rodimus Prime doesn't have to do that. He just has to, be in his trailer as a battle station. So I do believe that Rodimus does have the better robot mode. Just more love and more budget went into his robot mode than Motormaster's. Real quick, I also want to point out the interesting parallel between these two, because they are both, vehicle mode Transformers that have a trailer attachment, and they both get a ranged weapon and a sword to carry. Now, granted, Rodimus' sword is a new thing. The original Rodimus Prime didn't have a sword, but, luckily this guy upgraded, got the Sword of Primus, looks really cool. Whereas Motormaster always had his sword accessory. Now, I don't think he had a cannon. I never had the G1 Motormaster or Menasor, but I'm pretty sure there was no cannon. I think it was just a sword for that guy. So, really, each of them ends up getting a new weapon with this new incarnation, and just ends up being that much better for it. And real quick, here's a fun little group shot of Motormaster and Dragstrip teaming up, ready to fight off any Autobots or anyone that gets in their way, really. Now, I do think they scale better in the robot mode than they do in the vehicle mode. The vehicle modes, I don't think the size disparity is enough. Here, it feels just right. Like, the team leaders for the combiner teams, they're almost always bigger than their teammates, their component parts. Here, it feels pretty accurate. He's about maybe a head and a half taller than Dragstrip, and I think it works. I think they're just the right size to, have some really nice display pieces together. Aesthetically, they both match up very well because they're both mostly based on their cartoon appearance, with some slight modifications here and there, either for engineering or just, for artistic flair. So I like them. Between the flat colors, which, again, cartoon aesthetic, the modern engineering and the general scaling, these two just look really good together, and it's a good sign for how the entire team is going to end up working out. Alright, now it's time to transform his trailer into its base mode. So we're going to go ahead and kind of pick up where we left off with the few steps that we did to pull his weapons out of the trailer. If you're skipping ahead just to see this part of the transformation, you may want to go watch the very beginning of the robot mode transformation to see how we got to this point. So, start where we left off. We're going to go ahead. We're going to take this little square bit right here, flip it up like so. And then we're going to detach all this. Pull it away from this black piece, set the black piece aside. And we're going to fold all this together. While stretching everything out. And make this little tower. It's going to form like the turret section here. So, I guess we can go ahead and just place the cannon on here now, right? May as well. So just use that 5mm port, plug it right on here, flip the handles out, and that's your turret area. That'll be used for like bombarding Autobots and stuff. Okay, this next bit here, basically going to transform his combiner feet. So you flip this out, flip that down like so. Same thing here. And that's all you do there. I'm going to take these areas, separate them. And you want to bend these about 90 degrees. Like so. Take this section. You're going to fold these bits down. A satisfying click. Fold that in. Rotate all this. Like that. Now we got to take all these bits and pieces and combine them together. So flip this guy around like so. We're going to attach the combiner arms by plugging these little posts in these ports here. Just like so. They should line up and not wiggle around. So they'll hold their position like this. Then we are going to take the combiner feet, plug them in. Oh, we got to flip this back around first. There we go. Now you're going to plug the combiner feet in. And you plug them in with the little post on the foot being closest to you, if you're looking at it from this angle. So just plug in here. They form like little towers, which are okay, I guess. Nothing special. All right, then you take your turret area and you're going to slide it in to slot these little tabs into these holes here. Now, they may or may not want to stay in. I sometimes have to fight with mine a little bit. And I think it's a clearance issue more than anything, because it'll make this want to rotate, and you want to try to keep that straight while still keeping this tabbed in. And there it is. That's our base mode. Let's go ahead and bring the camera up so we can get a better look. And overall, it's not bad looking. It's a decent looking base mode, especially for something that has to be a trailer as well as turn into the body for a combiner. So it does not look half bad. And then we get Menasor here, and we can go ahead and have him man the turret section. Oh yeah, you want to lift this up too as like a pair of little binoculars, or view scope, whatever you want to call it. So you got to get his hands over these two posts here. So you just kind of work everything in, and you get this. So now you can use this thing to fire on his enemies from afar, as well as really see them with some sort of magnification here. Let me pop this off so you can actually get a look at that. See that bit right there? It's made to look like some sort of like viewfinder or binoculars. So pretty cool detail, and it's a good way to have a reason for that stock to kind of be there and not look stupid, right? It's not blocking his view, it's actually providing him a view. So it's a simple molded detail, but it helps make the whole, thing come together, really give that illusion that he can really see through this. And, honestly, I'm very happy with this. I think it came out very well for what it is. The one thing that is a little bit of shame is that there's really nowhere to store his sword, like, on Motormaster. He has a lot of 5mm ports, but not really any posts, and this thing only has, ports on the side. I mean, the handle's a post, but unless you want it, like, sticking straight out of his back, it looks kind of weird. But there are places on the base mode you can put this. I think my favorite would be something like right here. Plugs on securely, it's out of the way, and it doesn't look half bad. It's up to you. You have a lot of options. You can plug it here, I mean, all over the place. So yeah, I like the base mode a lot more than I thought I would. The initial pictures didn't really wow me, but getting it in hand, it's honestly not bad at all. It's a pretty decent looking base mode. I had to go with a really wide shot for this comparison. So now we get to see Motormaster's base mode against Rodimus Prime's. I didn't bother doing Optimus's base mode because really there just is no comparison. Optimus is a leader class. As such, his base is just an unfolded box. Like, it's very boring. So, yeah, not even going to bother. I'll just let you know it's nowhere near as good as either of these. All right, so seeing these two, I think each one has pros and cons. I do believe that Motormaster does the base itself better. Rodimus Prime's base mode is really more of a simple weapon emplacement, just like a turret section than an actual base. There's not a lot to it. What are you even gonna do besides man the turret? This looks a little more fleshed out. Now, is it big enough to be a decent base for larger Transformers? No. But it would make for a very nice, say, a Micromaster base. If you have some of the Micromasters from, War for Seibertron, they would scale with this actually very well, because it kind of looks like a small city. Rodimus it's really just a trailer with a turret. I would really call it more of a weapon platform mode than a base mode. So, yeah, I do think the base part is definitely better for Motormaster. I do think Rodimus handles his weapon storage a lot better, because if we go ahead and turn this around, try to do this gently, you can see his sword is stored on his back. And the whole reason that works is because it has a little flip-out peg that you can flip, either this way or that way, to plug into his back. And honestly, that's something that would have made Motormaster's sword a lot better, because his sword, unfortunately, is just a very simple single piece of plastic with ports molded in. If they had actually expended the budget to give it a little swinging peg like this one has, you could plug it onto Motormaster's back. Unfortunately, they didn't do it, so you just have to slap it on somewhere. It doesn't look as good. Rodimus also actually has his own ranged weapon, right, his own rifle, whereas Motormaster really just borrows the one from the turret, which means if you have the base mode set up and, intact, Motormaster no longer has a firearm and just has a sword. So there's definitely a little bit of give and take here. I think Rodimus can exist independently of his base a lot better, but Motormaster's base is just a lot cooler and is far more reminiscent of, some of the old classic base modes, like some you'd see on the Power Master Optimus Prime. Or even someone like Thunderclash, which has led to a lot of speculation about Motormaster being retooled into Thunderclash. I'm not sure how I feel about that, because aside from the fact that they're both trucks that carry trailers that turn into bases, there's really not a whole lot there in terms of similarity. Like, the general shape of the base is the same, but Motormaster and Thunderclash themselves are so very different that you would either have to have a massive amount of retooling, or Thunderclash would have to be severely compromised and be like a really obvious Motormaster retool. And I don't want that. Like, unless they're going to expend the amount of resources to help Thunderclash look like his own bot, I do not want him to be a retool of this guy. Like, even if it kind of works out because they both have a trailer, it just, Now, there is the prospect of actually getting a Turbomaster combiner out of that, right? Because if Thunderclash can form a super robot, that means you could probably retool some of the other Stunticons, or maybe even make new molds that could combine with his, super mode. It would be interesting, but again, we've seen what happens when you compromise individual robots to force them into being a combiner. When you get things like Volcanicus, when you get things like Optimus Maximus, the combiners themselves look okay, but the individual robots they look really bad. Some of them just don't even look very much like their original counterparts. So as a collector, I don't really want that, because I don't think they have the budget to do it in a satisfactory way. That's just me. I don't know if they'll go that route or not. I don't know what the end product will be. I mean, if they do it and it turns out well, cool. I mean, I'll buy into it. But I'm a little skeptical. Just a little worried it won't work out very well. All right. Time for the moment that most of you have likely been waiting for. We're now going to transform Motormaster and his trailer into the new Menasor Super Robot. So, first thing we're going to do, let's take apart the base mode. So we'll just take this guy off. Kind of set all this aside for now. Don't really need it yet. And we're going to separate all these components. So let's take the legs/towers off of the sides. And to transform these to the Gestalt mode, all you do is flip these panels up right here. It's literally all you do, right there. Flip up some panels. Not very complicated. All right, set those aside. And we're going to pull the arm structures off of the torso. Let's see, flip this around and close that up just like that. Get it out of the way. And we're just going to leave that off to the side. And now the arms. So the arms have these panels that are going to kind of fold down on themselves like so. Flip the fist down. And we are going to extend everything out. So it's going to be like two movements. One here, one here. And extend this out here, like so. Fold all this up too, get out of the way, and then fold the wheels in. And you get an arm. Do the same thing here. Kind of extend it all out. Fold the panels up. Same thing here. Fold those in. Now remember how I told you that these wheels were bent on mine? You can see how they kind of stick up and are a little bit of an eyesore in this mode. It's kind of annoying. Not the worst thing, they won't get in the way, but should be nice and flush like that. Like these guys. Sticks out a bit. Maybe I'll get a replacement. We'll see. And now for the most involved part of the transformation, we're going to transform Motormaster himself into his portion of the Super Robot. So the first thing you want to do is put his fists away. Close the panels back up. Get him nice and out of the way, like that. Then you're going to untab his back kibble and bring it back across his front. Collapse it down like so. You're going to fold the shoulder panels outward, but not all the way up, just out to the sides, and then these panels are going to swing out like this. So you do all that. You want to rotate his arms to where these tabs are facing down, and just kind of bring them in. You want to collapse everything together, and you see he has little 3mm posts on the underside of his hands. They're going to plug in right here. This doesn't look like it holds together well, but it will come together once you attach everything. It'll get nice and flush and pretty. Okay, next we're going to flip this panel, which reveals the combiner head. This is on a couple of hinges, so you got to kind of work it out. Bring it all the way up. So it clicks into place. Fold the Motormaster head away. Close this panel up. And we can flip his horns out, like so. And we're going to rotate the waist around. Rotate the feet inward. We're going to open up these panels right here. Collapse his legs in. And then fold the panels back over them. May have to make sure it collapses all the way, but may have to fight with it. There you go, like that. So you're gonna collapse them, and they gotta be bent a little bit, keeping them straight out, won't let you close the panels. So there you go, have them bent. Then we're gonna bring them up. This is where everything comes together. It's all gonna tab together at a few different points. So tabs in the back here. Let's get all this in. I had to play with it a little bit, but it'll go. Those come untabbed, just put them back. All right, the little kneecap bits, you're gonna swing those back in as if you were going back to the truck mode. Doesn't want to cooperate, there you go. All right, and then lastly, we're gonna flip these down, plug those in to make what are basically his version of combiner ports. All right, so looking pretty good now. Everything looks a lot neater. May want to just kind of fiddle with the arms till they look as flush and even as possible. There you go. That is the core of the Super Robot. So let's go ahead and attach this to the chest plate and hip area, like so. Fold that up, get out of the way. All right, and you bring these silver bits up to kind of help clamp down on them. So we have this. Next, we want to attach his feet. Which way does this go? It's this way, okay. So these are more or less Combiner Wars ports, and they function the same way. The biggest difference is that the combiner pegs now have these little tabs right here, which I guess, determine which way is the right way to lock them in, so you can't hook them up the wrong way. I mean, it's kind of nice, I guess, as a guide. The downside is that means that these legs are in no way compatible with the previous Combiner War style combiners, because those tabs just completely block those pegs from going in. Let's adjust the camera here. May need a second to get this just right. There we go. All right, so got this coming together. And then lastly, we want to attach the arms. And they attach just by sliding right over these bits here. And you should hear them click into place. All right. So here it is. This is what I'm going to call the Menasor Super Mode, because, again, I really don't know if combiner is the right word. Oops. I have a hard time calling him a combiner because he's just a super robot form. There, that's a better angle. Now we can go ahead and have him wield his weapons. So you can give him the classic sword right here. Put it there. And you can give him his blaster type weapon. So again, you want to kind of fold one handle away, get it in the hand. And you can kind of close that back in. All right, so now he's armed up. Looks very cool. I mean, for a large super robot, which are traditionally formed by some sort of a vehicle combining with his trailer, he looks really good. He's very steady. Let's go ahead and check out the posability. So the head on a swivel here. Unfortunately, there's no like hinge to let him look up and down. I guess you can flip that panel up, but then you're kind of undoing him. So he just looks back and forth. He's got universal shoulders that ratchet this way. They go out right here. Looks pretty nice. He's got a ratcheted bicep swivel, an elbow bend. He does have wrist swivel, which is also ratcheted. So they didn't slack off when it came to making sure he was steady. They wanted his joints to be nice and tight, so they used a lot of ratchets, which is good. One thing that bugs me is he has no hand articulation at all. The hands are just solid pieces, and that kind of kills me, because like combiners, like all of the modern combiners with the exception of the Hasbro Computron, have had articulated hands. That feels like something that shouldn't have happened given how much you're paying for this guy. I know there's already a lot to him, but the idea that he doesn't have hinges for fingers really bugs me and does make him feel like a little bit of a step down. Plus the hands could probably serve to be a little bigger too, because they're kind of tiny. All right, so he's got a waist swivel, which is actually not ratcheted, surprisingly, but it's steady enough. He's got universal hips that ratchet every which way. It's pretty nice. He's got ratcheted knees. He has a thigh swivel right here. Let's see, and he's got the ankle tilt. So as far as his main posability, he's got more or less everything you'd expect, except the finger articulation. That's something I feel is sorely lacking on this guy, and really, that shouldn't happen. Like, he should be able to move his fingers. He's a big old robot. The hand articulation's a must. It'd be like getting a Titan Transformer that can't move his fingers. You know, it seems off. Oh yeah, I should probably give you guys a quick look at the back, right? So the back looks like not too bad. I mean, you have the robot arms right here, but they don't look explicitly like robot arms. They just look like kind of interesting little mechanical details. So I'm okay with it. The backpack doesn't look bad at all. It's a lot better than the old one. Now, one thing that's really bizarre. We see here, we see these panels that form just kind of the heel spurs for his feet. They don't get to fold up like all the way. They have like a little groove right here, but then for some reason they decided to mold these little raised areas right there where the groove goes, and it prevents them from fully like sitting flush. They want to bow down a little bit, which means you are putting some stress on these whenever you put him down and put weight on him. You're kind of bending them against that raised area. I don't know why they did that. It reminds me of the Platinum Edition Tripticon, where for some reason they added some extra plastic where his little like feet forks are supposed to go, and you know, because of that, his feet don't sit completely flush. Now it's not as bad on this guy, mostly because it's thinner pieces and they have more give and they could bend a little, but it's not good. You're just automatically, by default, putting stress on those hinges. So I don't know why that's there. It seems unnecessary, and really seems like it's doing more harm than good. Now, before we get to the comparisons and group shots, let's go ahead and check out that turret feature. So we're going to bring this piece back in. Go ahead and take the cannon from him. All right, and then you're going to configure this a little differently. So you flip these out again, you flip this purple piece all the way up, and then you attach it extended like this, which, you know, gives it some extra height, so it's now a little more appropriate for, you know, how big Menasor is. So you get some options here. You can have him, you know, kind of one-hand it and keep his sword in his other hand. So go ahead and just kind of plug that in underhand now, if it'll let me. Go on, buddy. Doesn't work very well. All right, so you can get something like that, where he's just grabbing it with the one hand, or you can have him drop the sword, which does unfortunately mean you gotta find somewhere to put it. In this case, I'll just kind of leave it out for now. All right, and just have him go with both hands. Make sure you can get in there. It's funny because he's so tall, you have to have him kind of almost suspended suspend it a little bit. That looks pretty decent, right? It's got a little turret. It's a little small for him, but at least it's not too short. Like, it just reaches high enough to where he can hold this thing and fire at his enemies and just look pretty decent doing it. Now we need to check out Menasor's compatibility with his teammate Dragstrip. To do this, you want Dragstrip in his vehicle mode, and I would recommend, if you want to leave his blasters attached, to attach them backwards. That way they're not getting in the way of anything. Alright, so in order to do this, you actually have to collapse Menasor's arm back down. So, shrink everything down. You're going to move that panel out of the way for a moment. So you get a very small flat arm. In fact, it's very reminiscent of the old G1 Toys arm. Alright, so then you take Dragstrip, and you're going to attach him at a couple points here. So you got tabs here, tabs here. Just plug everything in, and this is going to activate the little, like, spring-loaded clip, which allows him to separate in half. So you get everything on there, and then we just pull him apart. And he should come right apart if you did it right. Then you can extend the arm back out, flip the kibble back in, and you get a much fuller-looking arm. And it looks pretty good. It looks pretty decent. I like it. Having the blasters turn around means they're also kind of pointing forward, so you can use them as like wrist-mounted blasters, if you want them on there. And it does a good job of filling things out. It looks pretty nice overall. We know that Dead End is going to work the same way, though his connection points are different, so you cannot swap the arms around. They're, specific to each character. But Dead End will do the same thing. He'll just attach in car mode and then split in half. As far as our leg bots, which will be Wild Rider and Breakdown, they're going to have like modified car modes where basically the hood flips up, kind of bends at about a 90 or so. They're going to plug on here, and what that's going to do is push this little purple slider. And that purple slider is going to cause these panels to close like a door, which are going to resemble details that look like the undersides of their respective vehicle modes. And the reason it works this way, the reason there's not just kind of an open frame for them to plug into, is that they are going for that animation accuracy, and in the animation, due to either time constraints or budget or whatever, Menasor's legs were drawn, his shins specifically were drawn, to look like the undersides of the cars, but were still drawn just like the same block gray as the rest of the leg. So this is a way of kind of creating that effect. So it's interesting. A lot of budget went into that pretty minor detail where perhaps it could have been allocated elsewhere, like, posable hands. But it is a cool feature. And this guy is, kind of bursting at the seams with gimmicks and little goodies here and there, so I don't mind it too much. Again, it's interesting, it's unique. Okay, this is probably the comparison that people have been wanting to see the most. So we finally get to see our new Legacy Menasor, or, what we have him so far, with the Combiner Wars figure. I'm going to do a much more in-depth comparison with these guys once this Menasor is complete, but for now, I don't want to keep you guys waiting months and months to see these two together. So you can see they're both quite different looking. The newer Menasor is significantly taller than the old one, so it does put him roughly a head or so taller than a lot of the Combiner Wars style combiners. Maybe not as drastic of a difference compared to the Power of the Primes, which had bigger feet. Because that's one of the problems right here, is the Combiner Wars guys just had really small flat feet. So they did diminish their height a little bit. But then there's also the fact of just how radically different the Combiner Wars Menasor looks from the source material, and that's mainly due to the torso right here. The original Motormaster toy had a robot mode that was comprised of both the cab and the trailer. Like, it was all one thing rather than having, the trailer be a separate thing. Because of that, that means that the torso area was also made of the cab and the trailer. So that led to a very, very different looking Combiner torso than what we ended up here, where it's just the truck cab. They also took a lot of really interesting liberties with the design, such as the head having, quite a different profile from this one, to give him like bull horns instead of more of these like antennae looking horns. I'm not sure why they went that route. It could just be the fact that Combiner Wars still hadn't gone like full G1 updates yet. They were still kind of residually channeling that older generation's idea of, reimagining certain characters rather than just recreating the old toys. So there were some rather questionable choices made when it came to the designs of some characters, where it felt like they were just changing things for the sake of changing things. If you're wondering about the car here, that's Blackjack forming this chest armor. He's optional, but I like the way this guy looks more with him in there. Otherwise, the torso looks empty. Now, the original toy actually had a little black car that came with Motormaster, and it would form like a chest armor for the combiner. So Blackjack, fulfills that role. And of course, the biggest functional difference between these guys is the fact that this Menasor is your more traditional Scramble City type, which means his limbs, or at least, great portions of those limbs, are the teammates themselves, are the other Stunticons. Like this whole arm is Dragstrip. He's not just attached to an arm. The lower legs are Breakdown and Wild Rider. In this case, they call them Breakneck because they didn't have the copyright then. And to me, that's always been the most fun thing about these Scramble City type characters, is that they were true combiners in every sense of the word, where he could not exist as a functioning robot without his teammates, whereas this guy can easily just be his own thing. And then the Scramble City part meant that any one of these limb bots could be an arm or a leg, left or right, and they could combine with any torso, which was the really fun thing about Scramble City, right? That's why it's called Scramble City, right? Like you just scramble them up. And you can make some really awesome combinations. In fact, a lot of those different combinations are canon. And that's something I felt was very much lost when they decided to go the TV show route for the new Menasor, because there's not as much play value across different toys. He may look better. I mean, don't get me wrong. This is a very, very clean-looking robot. And then he'll look even better once you get the other cars attached, because the legs will be more filled out and everything. He looks cool, and he's very, very stable, right? He's got really nice ratchet joints, everywhere. He's not going to flop around. The Combiner Wars toys, Combiner Wars didn't really have the budget that a lot of the newer lines did, right? Transformers was kind of trying to reprove itself to corporate and show hey, we can still make exciting stuff, which meant a lot of mold reusage. I mean, Dead End and Wild Rider here are the same mold. They just have different heads. There's a lot of that reusage going on, either within teams or between teams. And there were some design flaws that prevented the combiners from being very stable. We have the combiner pegs here, right? The universal combination system that even this guy more or less uses. But the old ones, the ratchets, they weren't very strong, and I don't think they had as many stopping points as they should, which led to a lot of these guys leaning back too much, leaning forward too much. It made them a little bit floppy and hard to pose. There were, places where the ratchets really needed to be stronger and they weren't. And then you had places where there just weren't ratchets at all where there should be. Like these elbows, which are formed usually from the Limbot's knees. There's no ratchet on them. And even the hips, which aren't supposed to bend in this mode, they're going to bend because there's no ratchets. They can't support weight like this guy can, right? This guy can hold his arm straight out and it's not an issue. Nothing's bending back, nothing's flopping. So that was, the shortcoming of Combiner Wars. And the current design team, I guess their answer to that was just scrap the entire system and go with show accuracy. And I know there are a lot of people that are big fans of show accuracy, and that's fine. If you are thrilled to have this, take on them, I'm very happy for you. And again, it's a good toy. I'm not saying it's not. But for me, it's just not nearly as exciting of a concept. Rather than just go back to the drawing board, why couldn't they just improve on what was here? We know what the shortcomings were. Lack of mold choice, weak joints. So fix that, right? Why couldn't we fix that? Make the combiner pegs a little sturdier. Put more ratchets in the, joints of the smaller bots. And in the case of Menasor, just, God, start over. Scrap this, because everybody hates Combiner Wars Menasor. And he's not bad because he's a Scramble City combiner. He's just bad because Motormaster is bad. It's just not a good Motormaster. And I don't talk about third-party a lot on this channel. I don't buy third-party stuff. But there was a third-party company, unofficial one, called Black Mamba, that had made their own Combiner Wars compatible Motormaster. And he worked like the old G1 toy, where he came as a complete cab and trailer, which transformed into a robot, which was very G1 based, and then combined, turned into a very, very G1 looking torso mode, and was compatible with these guys. And I mean, it didn't look to be anything super special as far as engineering. It didn't look like something that would be outside of a budget for a Hasbro toy. So they proved it could work. Now they got shut down because, you know, they are infringing on IP, but it was such a cool concept. And in fact, I'm putting pictures up to show you guys because it was so cool. It's a great prototype. So you can't say that they couldn't do Motormaster better and still keep them Scramble City compatible. Like, you clearly could. And then, you know, when it comes to the shortcomings with the limbs and stuff, again, just some ratchet joints in there. You know, bring these guys up to like modern standards. Better mold variety compared to what we had, where you only had like several molds between all the different teams as far as the deluxes. And you can make this work. And then the other big weakness with the Combiner War specifically was the feet, right? You had the whole hand-foot gun things, which were cool because they could be a hand or a foot or a weapon for the individual bot. And, you know, that gave them great versatility, but it led to unarticulated feet, which don't have any sort of ankle tilt, which made these guys, you know, kind of be forced into static poses. Power of the Primes improved on that a little bit, but it still isn't great. But when we got to the Takara Generation Selects combiners, where they went and, you know, made some new combiners, revisited some, like Abominus, Volcanicus, they really nailed it with the hands and feet. Like, I don't think those are outdated at all, and we should keep using those. I mean, imagine this guy with the, you know, Abominus hands and feet. He would be such a better toy and have so much more posability and just height to him and everything. So I know it could be done, and it's a shame that they abandoned the concept entirely. Now, normally I wouldn't be too worried, but like, oh, well, you know, Motormaster's different because he combined that way in the cartoon, plus he's got to have a trailer. And normally I'd say, okay, it's a one-off. Maybe they'll go back to something a little more universal now. But the designers have already said, oh man, the reception of, you know, this new Menasor was so good, I think we just want to try doing that for other combiners. And I'm like, no. Please no. It's already bad enough that this guy's not compatible with anybody. Then you're going to have like a Superion or a Defensor that work the same way, and you're going to lose a lot of that play value. So for me personally, not a fan of the direction. If you are, again, I'm happy for you, but you and I definitely have competing interests in this case because I prefer this style, this system over this. Execution wasn't good in this particular case, but that doesn't mean it's never good. Combiner War Superion, for example, is a fantastic toy. The Selects Abominus, fantastic toy. So it can be done, they just have to have the will to do it. Okay, I know this is another thing people really want to see, so we're going to look at the somewhat decent compatibility between this new Menasor and old Combiner Wars limbs. Now, the only part of him that's even remotely compatible is the legs. The arms use a completely different system, which is, you know, a shame in my opinion. Would have been cool if they, you know, made this work in a way to where it could utilize combiner ports too, but they didn't go that route. So, if you want to see how regular legs look on this guy, you just go ahead and remove these. And like I said, these legs are not going to work with other combiners because of these little tabs right here. I wish I would have just left them out, honestly. Would have just made them more compatible. All right, so you get this. You go ahead and plug the legs in from the back here. They will go in just fine. A little tighter than the other ones because the pegs are slightly taller. But luckily the spring has the give to, you know, let them go in. And here's the result. A little short man right here. That's what it looks like. It looks terrible, which is unfortunate. It would have been nice if you could swap the regular Menasor legs out to make it look good. But unfortunately, the proportions don't work. And the reason for that is that this Menasor has really, really short thighs and these really long shins. Whereas the old Menasor torso, you can see, actually has fairly long thighs, which allows for these shorter leg bots to be, you know, much better scale to it. So yeah, he ends up with these really short, nubby looking legs that just make him look like he's got big old gorilla arms. Plus, if you are using like the stock feet, the Combiner Wars feet, they don't have an ankle tilt at all, which means he can't even stand very well. These legs are too wide for him to have his legs like completely just straight together. They just kind of clash with each other and collide. So you have to have him at, you know, somewhat of an A stance to be, you know, any kind of stable, but the old Combiner Wars feet lack ankle tilt. So no matter what, it's not a good combination. It's a shame. They potentially could have, had a way to make this guy either, Sunbow style or toy style, but it really just doesn't work. And, kind of got my hopes up when I saw the combiner pegs and thought like, ooh, hey, I see what they're doing. But no, that wasn't what they were doing at all. So you can do this. It's just going to look stupid and probably want to fall over. Now, we've already compared Motormaster to Rodimus Prime several times, but what we haven't looked at is how well Menasor stacks up to the other large Commander class toys. So, over here on the left, we have our original Commander class, Jetfire, and then on the right, we have the second one that was made, Skylynx. And you can see they're very different. Jetfire is, humanoid, Skylynx is a big old space dragon. But upon comparing these guys, Skylynx actually comes out to be the heaviest, sitting at 801 grams, whereas Jetfire is a little bit behind him at 771. So that makes him a little bit heavier than Menasor, which does make sense because Jetfire is a very, very solid figure with lots and lots of ratchets and articulation. But Menasor is really not far behind at all, and he does end up being taller than Jetfire by about, half a head or so. So he really does compare better to these guys than he does to Rodimus Prime. Rodimus, unfortunately, remains the lowest value Commander class toy produced so far. You just get less of him for the same price. In fact, probably for more than what you paid for these guys because the prices have, increased. Which means poor Rodimus is still the iffiest purchase for your dollar. Menasor doesn't have as much mass as these two, and I don't know if I would say he's quite as good as Jetfire. Like, obviously Jetfire is not a triple changing combiner guy, but he's incredibly complex. Very, very sturdy. And then we get Skylynx here, who really is like a triple changing combiner guy, because he's a space shuttle and a crawler vehicle that can combine. He can form a base, and then he can form two separate creatures or combine into a winged dragon. So I think Skylynx still takes the cake for value. I don't know if we'll ever see a commander quite like him again, because he's really, really up there. So I would say Menasor is overall a little bit behind these guys. Do I think he's still worth commander prices? I do. He is definitely better than Rodimus Prime. As much as I like Rodimus, I really think he should have been cheaper. There should be, some sort of price point between leader and commander that he could slot into. But you know how this goes. You've been playing this game for a while. They have price points. They're sticking to them until they invent new ones, which I don't know if they ever will. And if they have a toy that's a little bit too much for one, but not enough for another, they're going to bump it up to that higher one, and you're just going to pay the difference. Sometimes they try to flesh it out. They throw in, blast effects or Hulk hands or something. But at the end of the day, you're really not getting the same value. So I guess where I'm going with all this, if you're wondering whether or not Motormaster is worthy of a commander price, I truly, truly believe he is. Not as much as these two. These two are still just the best commanders ever. But he's up there. He's, on the low end of what I would say constitutes the 80 to 90 bucks. And this completes our very in-depth look at the brand new Transformers Legacy Motormaster. If at any point during this review I gave you the impression I don't like this toy, I want you to erase that from your head, because I do. I think this is a fantastic, fantastic Transformers toy. Good as just, a Transformers toy itself, great as a commander class. It's a lot of fun, and this toy by itself has a ton of play value. I mean, imagine that, right? You're getting a tractor-trailer type Transformer that can, be a robot mode, it can have a base mode, it can combine with the base mode, so very much in the vein of a highly, highly articulated Power Master Optimus Prime, which is something that we're still sorely lacking. The last update to that design was Titan's Return, and it really wasn't very good. So this is more like, what you would want in a super robot type setup. And at least does prove that we could get a Power Master Optimus Prime if they made one at Commander scale, because they just showed that they can pull that off here. So, just as a singular package, he's great. And, his combiner mode that we see here, it looks good, and it's going to look good with the cars attached. So I don't want anyone to think that I don't like the combiner mode. I think it looks fantastic. It's just not what I was hoping for with an update to the Stunticons. You know, for me, I really think Scramble City compatibility is the way to go. Maybe not Combiner Wars compatible. Maybe they need to, you know, move to a better system, something that's a little bit stronger, but that should be the system moving forward. Instead, they want to go the animation route, which does result in a very clean-looking combiner, if you call it that. I still call it Super Robot with, you know, car pants. And I don't know, I'm so torn, right? It's a good toy, and I highly recommend this toy, but if you were looking for something that was more traditionally a combiner, and one that is going to have cross-compatibility with itself or with other combiners, you're not going to find that here. And it does, like I said earlier, worry me that they might decide to go this route for all the combiners, which means you're going to have a Superion whose limbs can't interchange, or a Defensor, or a Bruticus. And while they may look good, and they'll be like super screen accurate for you guys that love the screen accuracy, that overall play value amongst, you know, different toys is going to be hurt. So that's the route they went for this guy. They managed to give us a fantastic Motormaster, easily best Motormaster toy out there. And, you know, they did make the decision to no longer integrate the trailer into his body, but make it separate. And I do think that actually makes him a better toy than the original. He scales much better in vehicle mode, because if he was just like a Voyager-sized robot made of the cab and the trailer, that would have made his truck mode really, really tiny, like laughably small compared to like an Optimus Prime. So I think it does help Motormaster as a toy. I don't think it helps Menasor as a combiner, though. You know, they're going the route that so many third-party companies have done, and there's definitely an audience for it, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are like, you don't know what you're talking about, this is the best thing ever. Again, if you like it, I am so happy for you. This just isn't for me. And it disappoints me because it's not like next year they're going to make another one that is a Scramble City combiner. Highly, highly unlikely, right? They're going to go through the other combiners first. So it's going to be a long time before I see a good Scramble City Menasor that isn't a floppy piece of junk like the Combiner Wars one. So if you are here for just a great toy or a screen-accurate combiner, this is the toy for you. You are going to love this guy. He's going to look so good with his Stunticons all attached to him. And again, he's just so much fun. He's a great, great toy. If you were hoping for something that's going to be able to mix and match limbs and play like your old G1 Menasor played like, that's not this guy. It's a shame that nothing ever materialized that, you know, worked that way, that actually looked decent, but for right now, this is all we have. So it really just depends on where your priorities are. If you are like me, and you were disappointed by the direction they went, I still would say this is worth picking up, you know, if you have the funds to put down on a commander. It's still a lot of fun. It really is. If, you know, for nothing else than just the Motormaster toy itself, because he's great. Maybe buy this guy for Motormaster, and then maybe one day down the line, if they redo Menasor, you can, you know, display that as your Menasor. So, overall, highly recommended, despite all my misgivings about it. And I think anyone that picks this up will be very satisfied with it, provided they don't run into any yellowing or QC issues. Of course, this is just how I have so intricately explained that I feel about this new Motormaster. But now I want to know what you all think of this toy. Does this live up to your expectations? Are you someone that prefers the Sunbow method of combining or the toy one and you just don't care? Or do you not like this guy? Maybe you just can't get over the fact that he's not a traditional combiner. Maybe you don't like the way he looks. I mean, you know, he's not perfect. I think the robot mode could have been a little buffer looking. Or maybe it's just too expensive for you. Any and all feedback is always welcome in that comment section. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to toss it a like. Let YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. I thank you for joining me for this very lengthy, yet in-depth look at the brand new Transformers Legacy Commander Class Decepticon Motormaster. And with all that said, I will see you next time.